Okay, thanks everyone for coming. Thanks a million to Niamh from the Hope and Courage Collective, and Grace from the National Youth Council of Ireland, and Richard from People for Profit for being here to launch this bill, which will be introduced at first stage today, the Online Safety Recommender Algorithms Bill. Over the last couple of weeks, the very dark side of social media has come into the glare of public attention, with the reality that Grok was operating through X as a child sexual abuse image factory. It continues to operate as such a factory, and it acts as a factory in terms of the production of sexual abuse images of women. In response to that, I think the government was exposed in response to that. Like, the basic government approach towards big tech, as it has been towards Trump, is to appease anything that big tech wants. We have Taoiseach who has lauded AI without qualification as representing the new industrial revolution, being as significant as the invention of the printing press, without any mention of any potential downsides. So we have very much a tech booster government, but obviously came under massive public pressure to say this is simply not acceptable. We don't want child sexual abuse imagery being created in this way. Felt under pressure from the public. Then you had people, one minister saying effectively this is an individual issue. This is a matter for those creating it. It's not the machine that is actually creating it. It's not the platform where they're being put on, which is patently ridiculous. At the weekend, Simon Harris, I think under pressure in an interview, said some things are more important than money when talking about this issue. And I think that's the question for the government now. There's going to be a choice between the maximization of profits for big tech corporations on the one hand, and on the other hand, our children's safety, their mental health, their physical health. These two things are set against each other. And what our bill aims to do is to tackle another aspect of these big tech companies, which is the use of the social media algorithms to drive toxic, self-harm, misogynistic content at young people. And that's what's happening. There's innumerable studies which demonstrate this. I'll just list some examples which are very, very stark. There was one study done in DCU which set up 10 blank male identified accounts of 16 and 18-year-olds on 10 blank smartphones. You go into a shop, you buy a burner smartphone, you set up an account on TikTok or YouTube, and you put in your date of birth and you say you're a male. All of the male identified accounts were fed masculinist, anti-feminist and other extremist content within 23 minutes on YouTube. They did not, all of the accounts that did not seek out manosphere content were fed it within 2 minutes. By 2 to 3 hours of viewing, the vast majority of the content being recommended was toxic, 76% on TikTok, 78% on YouTube Shorts, primarily falling into the manosphere category, the most prevalent being Andrew Tate. The other toxic categories were reactionary right and conspiracy, accounting for 13.6% on TikTok and 5.2% on YouTube Shorts. Much of it was anti-transgender content. And what strikes you then when you look at what happens if you set up an equivalent account presenting as a young woman is then you are fed very, very quickly content promoting eating disorders and promoting self-harm. So of 1,000 YouTube video recommendations in a different study from the Centre for Countering Digital Hate, 1 in 3 were for harmful eating disorders, 2 in 3 were relating to eating disorders or weight loss, 1 in 20 involved self-harm or suicide content. So this is not people choosing to view this material. This is the algorithm deciding that this is what will get eyeballs to stick on our screens as long as possible in order to maximize the amount of money we can make by then selling advertising effectively. That's the dynamic. And this is having a really corrosive effect on our democracies. These big tech corporations are incredibly powerful, are shaping public discourse, are pushing toxic messages for their own personal interest, the likes of Elon Musk, and to maximize their bottom line. There's often a lot of discussion around social media which says, headline grabbing suggestions like banning social media for young people. But actually, like, the answer here is very, very simple. It's to turn off the toxic algorithms. That's what anyone who has looked at this with any degree of detail has come up with and proposed. The likes of the ICCL have studied this in detail, have said turn off the toxic algorithms. The first interim report of the AI committee in the Dáil, a cross-party committee, agreed unanimously with a recommendation that recommender systems should be switched off by default and social media companies should be banned from turning on recommender algorithms for accounts used by children. That's exactly what our bill does. So it turns it off by default for everybody. You can turn it back on if you're an adult, if you want to have this algorithm to deciding what you see. But for children, we need to protect children, free them from the imposition of this toxic stuff, and leaves the algorithm off for children. It's very, very simple. The question is going to be, the government has previously, Helen McEntee, in response to a question about turning off the toxic algorithms in the Dáil, has given a positive answer to it. The question is, are they going to be willing to act, or will they cave to the lobbying of big tech? Because that's already happened in this country. Commission Naman, in their first draft report, precisely recommended this. Then there was lobbying by social media companies, big tech companies, and it was deleted. And I engaged with the top of Commission Naman at the AI committee on this, and they said, well, after a process of deliberation and engagement with stakeholders, we decided to take it out. And I said, well, who were the stakeholders who engaged? And they said, well, different civil society organisations and big tech. And I said, well, what did the civil society organisations say? Oh, well, they said, this is a good idea. Oh, so it was big tech that called for it to be removed, and then it was removed in the final proposal. So that's the question, is whether we're going to stand up to the big tech lobbying and whether the government is going to be willing to do that. So I'll hand over now to Niamh MacDonald of the Hope and Courage Collective.
Cheers, thank you, and thank you for inviting us along today, Paul. So I suppose the Hope and Courage Collective, we work with communities, workplaces and institutions across Ireland to strengthen democracy and build collective resilience in the face of rising far-right hate and disinformation. So from our research and our analysis, algorithms favour emotive and polarising content. It is this content that sustains cycles of harassment, violence, especially against vulnerable or minoritised people, putting safety and lives at risk. These harms are not accidental. They're shaped by platform design, choices that prioritise engagement, growth and monetisation over safety. The Digital Services Act provides a legal framework to address these risks. But if we are serious about enforcement, focus must be on shift to systemic design failures and not solely focus on individual users. I want to give kind of 3 examples of research that we've done of incidents that have happened in Ireland. So City West, you may remember, of October 2025, when there was violence and riots there after the horrific attack on a young girl. So what we monitored and what we documented was unverified images and speculation about Garda activity near City West were rapidly amplified on TikTok, Facebook and X. Algorithms prioritised emotionally charged content framed through an anti-immigrant lens before accurate reporting emerged, similar to the November 2023 riots that we had in Dublin city centre. As engagement increased, hate narratives escalated, calls to action circulated, engagement grew, protest materials began to be recommended and live streams were boosted during disorder. The offline consequences included a congregation of 2,000 people at the peak at the protest, where Garda vehicles were set on fire, fireworks, bottles were thrown, people were hospitalised and the accommodation centre was attacked. We also last summer documented far-right agitators who amplified locations of homeless encampments of people seeking asylum, mainly men seeking asylum, and was due to the encampments were filmed, harassed individuals and used dehumanising narratives to incite hostility. TikTok was the main mode of this amplification. Over a 10-day period, hate influencers' content is escalated rapidly from small thousands to over 124,000 views. The algorithms every day continued to boost this and helped perpetrators identify and target individuals, creating real-world violence. We've also documented arson attacks, which is a key tactic that we see of anti-immigrant activists and the far right. A final example relates to 38 arson attacks and 8 arson threats targeting properties perceived as asylum seeker accommodation since 2018. Our research shows that these incidents start with rumours and speculation and hateful narratives online, and then are preceded or accompanied by arson attacks on these sites, and these are all amplified by recommender systems. So, but also what we did last October 2025, we did with Ireland Thinks, we conducted a poll on what the public think on recommender systems. So overall, 68% of people across Ireland are saying that they should be switched off by default, so users only see posts from people on topics that they choose. So 79% are concerned about lies, propaganda and conspiracy theories being pushed into feeds. 74 worry about harmful content targeting children. 73 fear violent threats being spread, and 67% say algorithms should not amplify hateful or threatening content. And just to finalise, so just to get back to the design of recommender systems lead to the amplification of hate and disinformation. They create permission structures for violence and normalise hostility. This is evident through the copycat behaviour we saw from homeless men seeking asylum, agitation that turns into real-world harm, and cycles of violence towards vulnerable people. So, algorithm design, therefore, does not organically reflect user behaviour. They are specifically designed and developed to shape and manipulate user behaviour. The harms documented by the Hope and Courage Collective are not isolated incidents. They are predictable outcome of an opaque system of design that optimises engagement and monetises our attention to generate fast profits. Our evidence clearly demonstrates the risk to public health and safety and well-being, and to social cohesion and democracy in the short and long term. So we are delighted to support this bill today, and we urge legislators to treat very large social media platforms as unsafe products and to hold them to account, just like big tobacco, a serious threat to public health. So we want to turn recommender algorithms off by default, to restore user control and let people choose the content they see, keeping everybody safe, and to enforce the DSA systematic risk obligations with a focus on algorithmic design and transparency. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Madam Neve. Next we go to Grace McManus of the National Youth Council of Ireland.
Thanks a million.
Do you want to move the mic? I'm actually okay.
You're good.
You're okay? Are you okay?
Don't put pressure on me. So in case you're not familiar with the National Youth Council of Ireland, we are the representative body for voluntary youth work organisations in Ireland, so we've over 50 members. And just to say thank you for having us here today and to commend you on this work. We think it's very timely and very important. And when NYCI is analysing an issue like this, we look at the benefit to young people versus the harm to young people, and we can't identify any benefit for young people for these recommender systems, and they're not telling us that there's a benefit to these, but we can certainly, as we've already heard, see the harm. We recently conducted some research, and it was small. It was a small sample size, but with 18 to 24-year-olds, to ask them what they're seeing online and where they're seeing it. It was focused on mis and disinformation. And they were able to identify some of the hate, hostility and extremist content that they're seeing as mis and disinformation, but they were still troubled by it. But what was really interesting to me out of that research is they're less able and less equipped at the moment to deal with that health, well-being and financial pressure video and content that they're seeing. And if you think about that then being pushed to them as they engage with it, as they're confused by it, get rich quick, if you don't earn $1 million by 20 you're a failure, all of this thing, if that's being pushed towards them, it's easy to see why they're struggling then with their mental health, with the stress of that. It's, you know, as Neve and Paul have already said, it's content that shocks and is very emotionally charged, and we're quite worried about the harm that would cause for them. Another interesting thing that came from the young people of that study was they are struggling with the power imbalance between not understanding how these algorithms work. I don't understand how they work. They're very complicated. There's huge teams that work on them. And so they're trying to manage that back. And often they're taking that role on behalf of their parents and with their parents. And that's not to shame parents in any way, but they're saying their parents don't understand how these systems are working either. And so they're stepping in to try and mind younger siblings. And that's not sustainable or safe in the long term. So for those reasons, we're very concerned. We would support the aims of this bill. We think it's very important that the recommender systems are turned off by default for children. And then when we're talking about that 18 to 24-year-old cohort, that it would be off automatically and that they would have a more informed choice about whether they want that or not. We also did polling in late summer of last year, and 7 in 10 people polled during that period believed that these recommender systems should either be banned or switched off by default. So there's broad public support for this as well. And for us, we really hope that there is broad political support for it then, and that this regulation is brought in a timely fashion.
Thanks, Grace. Next, Richard Boyd Barrett.
Yeah, well, I mean, very simply, I suppose, it's time for the government to stop dancing to the tune of these billionaires who are becoming obscenely rich by promoting sexual abuse of children, of women, of promoting toxic and hateful content, of stirring up division, of promoting content that does immense damage to the mental health of young people and of our society generally, and indeed of the workers who work in tech. I mean, I was out of the picket lines with the Covalent workers, who are the content moderators, who are on strike at the moment, who do content moderation for Meta. You know, when you talk to them about the sort of sick material that they have to sift out, but this stuff is actually being encouraged and promoted by the people who they work for, who treat them like dirt, and who don't give a damn about the damage that is done to our society, to young people, to women, to children, if they can make money out of it. So, you know, this is sick, depraved sort of profiteering on the part of these billionaires that is doing immense damage to our society, and particularly to young people and to women and to vulnerable groups, minorities, people of colour, LGBT people. So yeah, it's revolting, but something can be done about it, and that is switch off these toxic algorithms that promote this stuff, these recommender algorithms. And the question is, are the government going to continue to dance to the tune of the people who profit from this toxic, horrible content, or are they going to represent the wishes of the majority of people who clearly want this stuff to end, and who want to see the algorithms turned off? And, you know, I mean, we've seen just, if we don't stop this race to the bottom in terms of depravity and kind of principles and standards when it comes to the uses of technology, we've seen in the last week where it leads. It leads to Elon Musk promoting material that is about, you know, the actual sexual abuse of children. But we can stand up to these bullies. And it's interesting. I think we've got Musk a bit on the run because people have protested and got angry about it, not because of any action by the government. I mean, a week ago, the government were trivialising the entire issue. When I raised it on last Tuesday in the Dáil and suggested that we should send the police into X, Micheál Martin accused me of being guilty of Big Brother Orwellian tactics. When in fact if anybody's guilty of Orwellianism and Big Brother, it's his pals in big tech. But what's interesting is they changed their tune. The government have changed their tune, although not enough as far as we're concerned, because of course if you have a VPN you can still get around this geo-blocking. So they haven't actually shut down this despicable app and this feature of this despicable app. But I do think we have them on the run. We've got to keep them on the run. And, you know, you can stand up to the bullies. We've seen it with Trump. You know, Trump threatening Greenland, nanoput, as many, if not most, Greenlanders actually call it. But standing up to that bullying, and he backs off. So it can be done, and we expect our government to do so. So I think the public are behind us on this, and let's see if the government care more about the people of this country and their well-being, and particularly young people, children, and women, or do they care more about the profits of people, you know, who want to make profit from sick content?
Thanks a lot, Richard. Okay, questions.
I know you mentioned your...
Sorry, I was looking in both your directions.
I know you mentioned that you're not really in favour of a ban, but I suppose why do you think that it's not something that should be rules or brought in instead of, I suppose, changing the algorithms? Yeah,
I mean, I'm interested in the National Youth Council view on this in particular, but firstly for myself, one, I think you won't successfully be able to ban children from accessing social media, so you will just drive people into creating false accounts and so on. And two, I think it's a really paternalistic approach to take to young people, to say that those who run these social media algorithms, which really should be run by the public, they should be publicly owned, they should be run in the public interest, those who run them are pushing toxic content because it maximizes their profit. And instead of stopping them doing that, we're going to cut off your access to social media, to be able to, communicate with your friends, etc. All the things that we were told that when social media began, this like public space, see what your friends are up to, this like nice thing that we were meant to be able to use it to, and then it became such a toxic space. Like, there's lots of good reasons that young people want to be able to use social media, and I don't think, I understand the urge, and there's something positive about standing up to the big tech companies doing something. I think there's something positive there, but I don't think it's the answer. It's to restrict young people's access to it, because one, in and of itself, and two, then young people will inevitably try and get around it and then be subject to the toxic algorithm, whereas we can just turn off the algorithm. But you might have something to say.
Well, I won't take a firm position on it. We have to be very, mindful that it's not just me and my thoughts. We have over 50 member organisations who we'd have to consult with and consult with young people. But what I would say about the ban of under 16s, then there's a cliff edge, I suppose, for when you turn 17 and up to that 24-year-old age group that we'd be concerned about, that then all of a sudden they're exposed to these recommended systems. So I suppose I see them as two slightly separate issues in that these spaces are harmful for children and young people because of the recommender systems, and if you ban a certain age group from them, maybe that works and to take some away from it, but those recommender systems then are there once they reach that age, and then they're still harmful. So that's what I'd maybe say on that for the moment.
Yeah, from our position on this,
could you just turn the mic just in the direction even if
this one?
Yeah,
thanks.
I think the age verification treats one symptom of a harm while leaving the whole thing still there. It still leaves this cesspit there, and as Grace rightly said, children are outside of it. But it also shifts the responsibility onto parents and children, and is letting Musk and all the big tech companies and letting the government off the hook. Another thing we would be concerned about it as well is that we can see there's global shifts in who runs governments and different people in power. So we'd be quite worried about the exercise of state power over the identity of children as well, and having all that data bank there, and what does that actually mean? We don't know in 10 years' time who's going to be in the state, and what does actually all of that mean? So I think, and so it's making kind of state-run digital identity a condition for accessing or holding a social media account for age verification. It is really, really bad for children, but it's really bad for society in general, and children will not be evaded from that. We know that children can get in and watch 18 movies if they want, 15 movies if they want. We know that all of this can happen. There's fake IDs. We all know all of this. So what about we just treat it at the source, which is the systemic of these social media companies, and it is switching those toxic algorithms off by default.
I guess, sorry, just going off of your answer to that question, you mentioned children getting around if there was a ban. What's stopping children from getting around a ban on algorithms per se? What's stopping them from picking their age and saying they are an account over 18?
Yeah, the issue is that unless the social media platform is, quote, from the legislation, are aware with reasonable certainty that the recipient of the service has not attained the age of 18, has attained the age of 18, then it's turned off. So unless the social media company is able to satisfy themselves legally that someone is 18, then it's turned off. So, for example, a question people have asked before is, would this stop people having anonymous social media accounts? It wouldn't. People could have anonymous social media accounts, but those anonymous media accounts would not be age verified, and therefore the recommender algorithms would be turned off for them, not just by default, but turned off and not able to be exercised. Richard?
Just firstly on the political sort of pushback to this, obviously you said, you pointed to the total, which shows the vast majority of the public is in favour of changing the recommender algorithms and whatnot. Do you think the government is fearful then of political pushback as well as pushback from like Elon Musk, who's taken multiple cases against Thomas Schumann in recent months, but as well as that, the Trump administration said any attempt to regulate US tech companies would be met with tariffs, for example. Do you think that is the principal consideration of the government rather than the well-being of children across the country?
Yeah, I think firstly the evidence is very, very clear. Anyone who has studied this has seen that these toxic algorithms are really damaging to our society, really damaging to children in particular. And and that the answer is to turn them off. Right? That, like, literally, anyone goes out to investigate this, this is the conclusion that they come up with. And that applies to politicians as well. And again, I would say, let's see, but the AI committee unanimously agreed on an all-party basis precisely with what is in this legislation, that they should be switched off by default and banned from using them for accounts used by children. And that also has very broad public support. I see Brendan Smith from Fianna Fáil had a press statement 6 months ago calling precisely for this measure. So at least on paper, parties across the political spectrum support this because it's obvious, it has broad public support, and the evidence is there for it. I think what we are going to see, though, is precisely that, is the Irish government is very, very focused on Ireland being a very welcoming place for big tech. You see that in relation to data centres. Pascal Donoghue, now no longer in the Irish government, has had some sort of come to Jesus moment and seen that, oh, we can't just have more and more data centres, and it doesn't make sense for a country like Ireland to have a third of our electricity going on data centres. You see today in the Irish Times a report about how the expansion of energy means we could be facing like blackouts, brownouts in the next few years. But if you look at data centres, the government just bends over backwards to put big tech companies before housing, before transport, before climate. And I think the danger is that they will do the same on this. So far, they have done the same on this. They've refused to act on this. And like I said, Commission Mann watered down their own recommendations after lobbying by big tech. I guess the thing I'd say in our favour at this stage is that what can counteract that, the government feels a lot of pressure from big tech, feels a lot of pressure from Trump, but is if the government feels big public pressure from below. Like you saw that happening over the course of the last week, where the government did sort of shift its position step by step on the issue of the child sexual abuse imagery being created and abuse imagery of women being created. And that came because of public outrage. So for us, that's going to be the next step, is to develop a big public campaign for people to contact their TDs, to mobilise. There was a protest outside X at the weekend to maximise public pressure to say you have to listen to what people want and you have to do what's best for children and our society, rather than bending over for big tech.
Yeah, let's turn the mic towards Richard.
Sure. I just want to make a point as well that, see, I think the likes of Musk and Trump and these people are exposing themselves in a way that is leading huge numbers of people to really reject them and turn away from them and feel horror and revulsion in the face of their agenda because it's revealed itself. You know, it's a little bit like, the horror that was being visited on the Palestinians has been going on for decades, and then all of a sudden people see this actually leads to genocide when you let it go. And the world is revolted by it and rises up against it. And I think in the same way, the sort of shock and awe of Trump and these social media companies promoting that sort of content, people are now seeing where it leads. And there's the beginning of a pushback, I think, in society generally and across the world against what they represent, the content that they're promoting, and a growing understanding of just how bad it is for society. So I'm hopeful this can be a turning point against these social media companies, the people who run them, because they've started to reveal themselves. Trump has revealed himself, and Musk has revealed himself with the Grok app. I think this is a moment when we can stand up to them and not be so fearful that there's going to be some terrible consequence if we do.
Just to follow on then from Grok, obviously over the last couple of days we've spoken to two young women who have both been the victims of deepfake image abuse, Sonia Milburn and Lucy Geraghty, and both of their experiences have been informed by Grok. They've come forward as something they suffered in the years before Grok, but because of what's happened now to thousands of other women around the world, they wanted to share their story. And both of their stories were, they said that they individually had good guards to go to who were understanding, but it seemed very piecemeal depending. You were passed from station to station. They were told there could be prosecutions in this case, or there wouldn't be prosecutions depending on who they spoke to. There is a push from some parties to introduce new laws on the margins of Coco's law about generating or editing images of adults. Do you think there is a need for better training, new legislation, or is the legislation that is currently in place enough, as you see, to handle what we've seen over, the last number of weeks?
Quickly myself, and I think others might want to. I think that we've looked at this. I think there is an issue with the legislation as it currently stands in terms of non-nude abusive imagery of adults that is not covered, that is generated, that is AI generated, that is not real, that is not covered under the current legislation as we read it, and we're working on an amendment to it. I would say in addition to that, though, that we know lots of what's being done is absolutely illegal, is not in a grey area. There was no question of Grok AI or X breaking the law very, very clearly, and the ICCL, for example, was very clear on that very early on in the development of the controversy. And so I think it also speaks to, so I think there are some kind of greyish areas where we need legislation to absolutely clarify that this abusive imagery is illegal, but two, then we actually need to have a serious approach of the state acting on the existing laws. And I mean, look, you only have to look at the case of the woman whose the husband was the guard and the abuse. And, if you have a Garda force where this can happen, we know about the unanswered calls in terms of domestic violence and so on, is that there is quite a systemic problem there that then expresses itself when people come forward with any sort of suffering abuse of a misogynistic nature and criminal nature. So
Yeah, I suppose just on a wider point of just the understanding of harms on social media and real world harms, and not maybe equivalent the two together. Does that make sense? So they can happen physically but not happen online. And we see a lot of that in the work that I do. There's a lot of abuse, there's a lot of threats, an awful lot of that. And then there is trying to get an understanding within the local within Garda Síochána of what does that actually mean. So I do think local Garda Síochána need a better support. I think higher up in the Garda there is a better understanding, but I think on the ground in communities, I think they need support to understand how this manifests from online, and then it can turn into riots, or it can turn into blockades, or it can turn into violence on the ground. So I do think there's other support. But also, I was in the media committee last week when the Garda was there talking about the 200 cases. And we also have to understand that there's a flood going into the Garda when there's actually a mechanism to stop this in the first place. There is actually a mechanism where the structural of turning off those toxic algorithms. And also we have to understand that the toxic algorithms, how they create those algorithms is it's not viewed to public. We don't know how they're created. We don't know how they're switched on. We don't know how they're, I kind of see them like a magnet for for toxic content. And we should be demanding that those algorithms are made public. We understand there should be research into them. And also, can algorithms be something as a public good as well? Absolutely. It's not about the big bad internet. Yeah. It's about who's holding the reins of the internet. And at the start of the internet, it was something that could have been very democratic, very social, and for everybody. But now it's in concentration into the power of these multi-billionaires, and they're wielding that power geopolitically. So I think we need to break that down. Yeah.
Grace, let's get your reaction as well from the women, or from the Youth Council, obviously Women's Aid and Rape Crisis Centre were saying that there needs to be a nationwide campaign to understand that making these sort of images of children, of adults as well, is illegal, can be illegal. But there isn't that understanding there, that people don't understand, as Niamh says, the real life harms. People we've spoken to have had to move home, change jobs, years of therapy and medication as a result of this. I mean, does there need to be a push from the Youth Council and other organisations about the real impact of all of this sort of stuff?
Yeah, and we would always say that we need to bring young people with us. I get the privilege of working with young people, and they are amazing young people will listen to other young people before they will listen to me, sadly. I'm getting too old now. And they have the capacity. And
wear banjos.
Speak for yourself,
but of course we don't want to put it all on young people's shoulders either, so there's a role for all of us, and we do that in a supported, mindful of their capacity and their evolving capacity way. And what was coming to my mind as well when you asked the question is, when we're talking about adults, 18 to 24-year-old women fall into that adult category, and they are adults, but they're also maybe in vulnerable parts in their life. Their capacity is still evolving, and we would have particular concern for them, on top of obviously the child safeguarding issues. So that would be our take on that. I think that young people are aware. They tell us they are struggling with this content. They are fearful of this. They are anxious about this, and I think there's a role for them with us supporting them to take on a campaign about this, that it's not the they don't want to be in a world where this content is easily created and is easily pushed. So that's kind of my perspective on that.
Thanks a lot.
Thank you.
Thanks everybody.